Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to another wonderful interview on schoolism. I am super pleased and super honored to have with us one of the top concept artists in the game, Mr. David Levy. He has worked on such things as Prince of Persia, Assassin's Creed, Tron Legacy, Prometheus, The Thing, Ender's Game, Tomorrowland, and the highly anticipated sequel to Avatar. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, David.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, and I'm actually a huge fan of yours too. So, it's a huge honor for me. So, as well, just so you know.
Right on. I am so glad that I recorded that comment, and yeah, that just puts a big smile on my face. So it is an absolute honor to interview you. So really, thank you so much. Um, how we do these interviews is that these interviews they're for artists. So we want to really delve into things like your philosophies on art, your philosophies on what got you to where you are today. So, if we don't mind, or if you don't mind, I'd like to just start off in France because you
Sure.
lived in France for how many
Yeah.
years?
I lived in France for approximately 19 years. I left France around 19, I guess. So I was born in South France, in Montpellier, a small place called Montpellier, and I grew up there. And yeah, went to school there, and then I started studying design when I was just past 17.
Hmm.
I went to industrial design in a town in South France called Toulon, so I was in industrial design school there for 3 years.
And how well did did the school prepare you for concept art?
Well, at the time, concept art, first of all, was this unreachable thing that not everybody actually, that very few people knew about, but that artists would dream about and think, well, it will never be for me, but okay, you know what? I mean, it's good to dream about that and to see movies and see Star Wars. And so it was almost like that unreachable dream, especially at the time, there was, first of all, no internet was the thing to remind people. There was no concept art schools. Nowadays there's more and more, but at the time there was completely non-existent. And in France, I mean, being an artist had really that stigma of being a bum, basically. So it was very hard to convince your parents or anybody around you that it was worth spending some money to school in order to learn art and get maybe a job.
Hmm.
And especially industrial design is kind of on this rail. Once you start designing toothbrushes, for example, you'll design toothbrushes until the end of time. So
How did you avoid it? How did you avoid designing
uh,
toothbrushes?
well, I mean, it can be very fun, but so what happened is that I think well, first of all, my father was really a big fan of movies. He was always a big fan of movies, and um, and I think in some ways also the fact that because my parents were very busy at work, I was kind of a neglected kid, and like many neglected kids, you can of like fall back onto something that gives you your own entertainment, your own learning exercises. And I was really a big fan of drawing. That's how I became a big fan of drawing and spending more time doing that. And so what that built up is that built up that interest for things like movies like 2001 Space Odyssey. That was one of the videotapes we had at home because my dad was a big fan of Kubrick. And since at the time there was not many videotapes you could buy or get or things like that, I just had like few videotapes. I had 2001 Space Odyssey, I had Blade Runner, I had Jeremiah Johnson, which is like Western movies, which I strongly advise to watch. And I had those few movies and I watched them hundreds of times over and over and over. And I think that gave me that base that followed me even in industrial design. And at the time, I didn't even know that I wanted to do entertainment. I didn't know you could do entertainment. So I was thinking, you know what? I like design. My mom saw that I like drawing. So she put me into a school without telling me. And then I had to go pass a test to see if was going to be received. And I was really against it because I was scared, of course. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Why would I go there? I draw just for fun. I mean, there's nothing I can do with drawing. And I went to the school to the test. Out of 500 students, they were picking up 20. And I saw all these students around me, and they knew what the school was about and things like that. And I thought, you know what? This is probably going to turn into a big failure, but I had fun doing that test, you know. And to my shock and my parents' shock, I was received. So I had to scramble and actually get my high school diploma in order to get to that art school. So until then, I had been kind of like a little bit of a lazy dude at school, you know,
Uh-huh.
and I had to scramble my last year in order to pass so I could go to that art school, you know. So,
Wow.
so it was kind of like a honest. My mom saw that there was something. She could tell there was some kind of talent or maybe interest, you know, and she decided for me that I should maybe try that road, you know.
Wow.
So
That is, it's sad, but that is a rare thing,
very rare.
amongst
Yeah.
a lot of parents of artists and things like that. Uh,
So I owe a lot to my mom.
wow. So when you moved to America when you were 19, or did
Actually,
you move to
oof,
America
that's
when you were
a
19?
much longer story. I moved in the US when I was 25. Between France and the US, it's a long road because you know you have this. It's complicated for foreigner to come and work in the US. It's complex for visas. It's complex for you have to prove that you are valuable to the American economy in order to get a job in the US. You know? So before that, I mean, America was always a dream, but I didn't even think that I would ever live here. You know, that never crossed my mind. You know, for many years. And I just followed my passion of designing and doing art. I went first to, after my design school in South France, I went to Holland and I did architecture for a year. It was great because that was actually sponsored by the government. So a big part of it was paid. I mean, at the time, my mom and I didn't have much money, so that was great. And after, what was great about architecture in Holland is that it was very, very freestyle, very opposed to France. In France, when you go into design school, it's very, very dogmatic. You do design, that's what you're going to do. And like I say, you're going to design toothbrushes or you're going to design vacuum cleaners, and that's all you're going to do, you know. I'm nothing bad against that, by the way. I think industrial design is an amazing job. But there was something, I was a dreamer, you know. I think that was the big difference compared to other artists. I was a dreamer and I dreamt about movies, I dreamt about sets, I dreamt about robots. I drew robots all the time. And in Holland, I had the chance to, because it was different from France, you were allowed to do anything you wanted. You could take on camera photo classes, you could take on sculpting classes, you could take on watercolor classes if you wanted to. And that's what I did for a year. For a year, I tried everything. And I think that really expanded my mind in terms of what my abilities, what I like to do, and I knew that somewhere, somewhat, all this will make sense at some point. And so after Holland, I went to London, where I worked for 3 years into a small game company, and then that's when I thought, you know what? After working in London, I worked in Paris for a year. I worked on maybe 8 different projects for video games for small companies, and out of 8 projects I worked on, 0 got produced. Like 0, none of them saw the light of day. And I thought, you know what? There's been 8 years that I worked my butt off. I mean, I've done so much artwork, and nothing has been validated. You know, all my work always ended up in the trash because the project, either the company bankrupted, either the CEO would take off with all the money, either you know there was. I mean, I went through the craziest adventures I think in my young years as an artist, and it was tough. It was really tough and not easy. And I remember very clearly thinking at some point, where are projects finished in entertainment right now? And I thought it's either the US or Japan, maybe, you know? And I thought, well, I'm going to try to go to the US. You know, I was in England. I prepared a portfolio. I worked very hard. During the day, I was working at that small game company. And during the night until 4 a.m., I would work on my portfolio, and then I would go back to work at 7. And I did that for a whole year, where I painted. I did, and at the time wasn't most of it was not digital painting. And I was ready to be hired to do anything. I was learning rigging by myself, and at the time, rigging was very crude, in 3D. I was learning to animate. I was learning to render using 3ds Max, which was at the first iteration at the time. And then I was learning Photoshop. And I remember I was one of the first guy around me that had a website. And the website was horrible. It was just like, that was my photo, and there was like 2 scanned artworks that were there. But I did like an interactive DVD that you could click on, and then you would see all my artwork as like a slideshow. And with some friends, I went to, and I'm giving you the short story because it's much more a soap opera than that, but that's the short story. So with some friends, we went to one of the E3 shows, which at the time was Atlanta. That was maybe like 20 years ago, something like that. And I went there, and I gave my DVD to everybody I could see. I gave my DVD to all the companies, and I thought, you know what, something is going to come out of that. And something did come out of that, and I can't thank enough my friend Jonathan Garrett, who's now an amazing programmer for Ratchet and Clank, and who actually picked up my DVD and gave it to a company at the time called Acclaim, where he was working. And at the time, Acclaim was working on the Turok sequels, Turok video games, and they hired me, and that's how I landed in Austin, Texas, when I was 25. There you go. So that's the super quick short story of the craziness. There you go.
Wow. And did you know anybody in Austin when you moved?
So I arrived in Austin. And that's a whole story on its own. When I arrived in Austin, I had to wait 5 months for my visa to go through. They had to wait 5 months for 5 months. I didn't have any job. So I was in France, and the little money I had left over from the video games I worked on in England that I had saved. I know at the time maybe I had like $5,000 in my bank account. So for 5 months, I just burned all my money doing the stuff I loved. And every week I was expecting a phone call saying, "Hey, welcome, welcome." It wasn't coming. So I burnt all my money through snowboarding, windsurfing, and staying for free at my parents' house. That's how it was. And actually, I think that was a very smart thing to do, because when I think about it, that was the only 5 months in my life that I had of true vacation. After those 5 months, I went on to like a 20-year binge of working. So so when I arrived in Austin, I knew no one, just my friend Johnny, who had taken my DVD, and I knew no one. I had $0 in pocket, and so I stayed on the couch in my friend's apartment for a month, and I had a backpack.
Your friend, the programmer.
Johnny, yeah, exactly, and his wife, who very nicely welcomed me there.
Wow.
And I slept on the couch, and then once after the first month, I had my first paycheck. Then I slept in my own apartment on the floor, and that was like that for a few weeks. And then I had friends that gave me a mattress. That was the second month, and then from there I was able to buy a light and then a bed and things like that. So I started really from scratch when I arrived in Austin.
Not only from scratch, but just from the stories that you've been telling me so far, it's like, you were not the type of person to wait for a handout, wait for people to give you a special, concept art lesson or a rigging lesson or things like that. You really went out there and learned all these things on your own. Like, how important do you feel that was for you to make it?
I think there was a hunger in me that was completely, in some ways, based on ignorance. I had no clue how difficult things were, and I had no expectations either. I didn't know where that was going to lead me. I was just doing it because I was starving for information. I just wanted to know. I just wanted to see how things work. What makes something move on the screen? Why is something more beautiful than something else? What makes a difference? And I remember, my big thing was I was a real parasite with my friends at work. I would be on their shoulders all the time asking them questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? I was a pain in the ass probably for them, poor guys, but but I don't know where what it was. I think a lot of it, in some ways, was because my parents weren't much there when I grew up, and because my parents divorced when I was a teenager. I think that was a big part of me that wanted to prove my parents that I could do something good. And they were looking at me doing artwork, and they were thinking, yeah, that's cute, kind of thing. I just wanted to prove them, no, no, that's valid, that's valuable, that's something that can bring something to this planet that of value. And I think that was the force driving me.
But you're thinking this, you're saying this, and pretty much I could just imagine that there's hardly anybody around you in France or in Holland at that time where they were thinking the same thing, that they're gonna, be able to do that kind of stuff too. So, did you ever have any like self-doubt moments?
It's very weird because it's almost things have been working backwards for me. Where when I was young, I had no fear at all. And strangely, as I get older, it's almost like I climbed like some kind of massive elevator, or massive building or structure, and then now I'm on top of it. I'm like, what the hell was I thinking when I did that? And now I have more fear, and I find it more difficult to not be afraid of taking risks. But when I was young, I was completely fearless. I would just have the little money. Maybe if I had like $100 left, I would take a airplane ticket and go to a company, and try to get a job. And I was like, okay, well, I'll eat whatever I find there when I get there. Yeah, I think I was just ignorant and fearless because of that. So, mm.
So, during this time when you're starting off, you're trying to learn all these things, and obviously you're very good at them now. Can you remember any kind of interesting habits or exercises that are a bit more special that you did constantly that really, aff affected you in building your artistic abilities?
I remember one thing that and I don't. I mean, in general, I think that copying artwork is not necessarily the best thing to do, and because you pick up the mistakes of other artists and things like that. But I remember when I was young, and I was a student, art books were very hard to find in Europe, very very difficult. And not only that, they were when you did find them, they were very expensive. And as a student, I had no money. So one thing that I found that I could do was that I would borrow my friends' art books and I would redraw entirely the art book so I could keep a memory of it. There was no online website for artwork or anything.
Wow.
And I remember very clearly the one art book that really gave me that shock was at the time in Tron by Shiro, Masamune Shiro. And I remember being so blown away by the newness of the thing, and the originality of the designs he was doing. I remember taking the art book at home and redrawing the entire art book and then giving back the book to my friend. And I realize now that was completely nuts, at the time. But at the same time, I think that gave me some kind of drawing self-confidence that was, I guess, a way to practice. The other thing I was doing as well, which I wish I did now, but I don't do anymore, is sketchbooks. I used to carry a sketchbook all the time with me around, and that helped a lot. Yeah, so I think these are basic things that actually we tend to forget as artists.
And speaking of books, you tend to read a lot.
Yeah, over the last few months, because I just had a daughter 5 months ago, I haven't watched a movie, I haven't read any book in 5 months. I've just been battling sleep deprivation for 5 months. But before that, yes, I love to read, but really many different subjects. I go through phases, and it's funny because I know other artists that go through the same thing. I mean, one of my very good friend, Nicolas Bouvier's path, which I adore, and like revere as an artist. I've noticed that we go through phases where, for example, I'd go into photography or I would go into filming, and I would just read everything that I need on that subject. I would just buy all the books I can find, all the DVDs, all the information I can find. I just almost like an addiction. I would read everything until I'm disgusted by it at some point. I go through those phases, I guess. Yes.
So, out of all these books, do you have any kind of favorites that you would recommend to the artists out there?
Well, I'm going to tell you something that's very weird, but I think it was also one of the big corners in my life. Is when I started to value artwork not only for the love of it, but also for the self, uh, I would say, care of myself, which is uh, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I know it sounds like this very cheesy book that you see advertised everywhere on websites and things like that, and it has nothing to do with art. It has nothing to do with filming or nothing to do with painting or anything. But the amazing thing about that book is that it forced me to think not only as my artwork as something that I loved, but as something that could provide me with comfort, a house, a family that I could build, and a way to financially become independent. And because no one in my family ever gave me those basics of how to run a bank account, how to save money, how to. And I think that's an issue that a lot of artists face because in the end, it's great to do artwork, but if you don't value your artwork as a way to live comfortably, I think it's not right. And a lot of artists and a lot of companies are very much willing to take advantage of artists, pay them nothing or pay them later or never pay them. And I think that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, allowed me to own a house, which I think when I arrived in the US with $0, I never thought I would own a house. And so I think it really helped me. I read it many times. It really helped me value myself so I could earn the money I deserve for the talent I have. Here we go.
That's great.
Strange answer, maybe, but
No, I like the book as well, and a lot of times I'll tell students that being an artist, especially if you're freelance, it's like 40% is how well you do the art, even though you must be able to do great art. 60% is all this other stuff, right? Like
exactly,
learning how to communicate with people, learning finances, and things like that.
exactly. And even more on that point is that when you work on very high pressure projects, what I've noticed is that it's very hard to function at your 100% artist self, because you're under crazy pressures that you did not expect when you were practicing. But that's why it's so important to practice, so that even if you run at 40%, like you said, or even 30% sometimes, if it's very chaotic around you, the practice that you had in the past allows you to still have valuable artwork output. Anyway, so.
So, dealing with pressure, because I hear this a lot, and people are pressured. They feel so much pressure even before they start working on big projects, right? What kind of advice would you give to the artists out there to deal with pressure?
I think, I sometimes have trouble with it. I think something that as an artist you will face your whole life. But I think if you have a comfortable life and a life around you, I want to say comfortable. I mean, with people that surround you that are good people. If you have a good family life, if you have I don't know, maybe you're married or you have girlfriend or you have parents that matter to you, or you have people. I think the structure of life that surrounds you defines the comfort you will have in your daily life, either as an artist or as a person. So I think if you manage to get a stable life around you, then that makes you more. That gives you self-confidence to face whatever you have to face in your work, I guess.
Like
Hmm.
a important support group, pretty much.
Exactly. Sure. And it can be anything. It's true. I mean, if you don't have family, I remember when I was young and I was by myself, away from home and with not many means to communicate with my family in Europe, to me, forums at the time became my family. Like places like Concept Art or like Francis Tsai Team GT at the time, which was ages ago, were the first forums, and that almost was a family to me. I would post every day, and I would see other people posting, and I would comment and say great or whatever, and that became kind of my support group in some ways, you know. So wherever you can find it.
The good old days.
Exactly.
Yes. Um, yeah, that's I as well. Forums and things like that. It really helped me in the beginning. Um, and it's great to hear. And out of all the different things that you've done in your career, and still to this day, what was one of the happiest days in your art career? Can you share one with me?
Yeah, I mean, one of the happiest day I think was when I remember very clearly. I was living in Austin at the time, and I mean, I have to tie my life with the work. So I just came back from a horrible relationship, and I had a really bad breakup, which was basically like a divorce, you know. And I remember the day after that breakup, I got a phone call from Disney, and they asked me, "Do you want to work on Tron, the next Tron movie?" And you'd have to move to LA for a month. And I thought, I mean, it was hard because I had a house in Austin, I was paying for it, and I had a job. And I thought, you know what? These kind of things don't happen just like that. There's a path that I followed through my life, and which happened to that moment that I have to make a choice. And I thought, you know what? This is the best choice I have to do right now for me. And I decided to leave Austin and take all my chances. Took my car and went all the way to Los Angeles, and worked on probably what was the best job I ever had on Tron Legacy. And the 1 month deal turned into 2 years. And I stayed 2 years on the movie, and I worked with the most influential people I've ever worked with in my life. So I think those 2 years was almost like surfing happiness for 2 years nonstop. So that's what I would say.
And was that your step into movies?
Yep, that was my first step into movies. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So, what did you end up? What were like the key things that you were the most proud of designing on Tron?
It will be always hard to say because, I mean, as usual, a project that of such size, is never the project of one artist, one person. Especially when you look at the artists that were around me. You had people like Neville Page, Daniel Simon, Ben Proctor. I mean, a slew of huge talent. And so I would say, I mean, it'd be hard to say, but I would say like the one thing that I was proud of would be working with other guys on the atmosphere of the End of the Line Club, where there was like all underlit, like with lit floors and a very moody atmosphere, and so I guess that would be that, and also working with the city layout, the look of the city itself, with other guys on it. So that'd be my proud thing.
And out of all these experiences, now you're into movies. What did you find the biggest difference was, designing for a movie versus designing for video games?
I would say that maybe there's difference in rhythm. Games sometimes can be more of a marathon. Sometimes games take 3 years to develop, 4 years. Although nowadays some games are very fast too. It takes 6 months. But I would say the rhythm is a little different where, for example, in a game, when you do characters, which I haven't done in a while in movies, you would do like one character, and then you have to do like 50 versions of the same character with like different armor, different, if it's a fighting game or whatever, armors, or you do helmets or whatever. And for a movie, it's a little different where it's more micro detailing. Usually in games, the micro detailing, we go to the 3D modeler or the texture artist or the 3D team, But in movies, you really have to micro detail depending on the shots. So you would have, for example, a storyboard shot where, let's say, someone enters a building, okay, and that entrance of the building is going to be full screen. Okay? So you have to micro detail that entrance. You have to work maybe on the inlays, if there's decoration, sculpting on it, and the different angles, because it's going to be so big on the screen that you want to make sure that it's detailed enough. When it comes to a game, if you have to do an environment, you may be able to do like a fairly impressionistic concept that can be given to a team that's going to detail it later. So I would say that's the biggest difference. Also in movies, you can walk through a set, although nowadays it's more and more virtual, but you can still nowadays walk through a set and experience the set as a physical piece, you know. So these are the differences.
That's great insight. And, games, films, they seem to change year by year.
Exactly.
And a lot of times artists, we develop certain habits in our designing or our ideas. Is there a way to increase your imagination, keep it fresh?
That's the $1 million question. Well, if you know a trick, I'd love to hear it. But I'd say it's, I'd say, I mean, having done that for many years now, I'd say that it's more accepting the fact that it fluctuates. It's, my wife is big into yoga, okay? So I try to go with her once in a while. And she always says, every day is different. You're going to have a day where you're very creative, and another the day where it's going to be horrible, you know? And just accepting the fact that this is where today is, what tomorrow is, and understanding the fact that maybe today you have amazing inspiration, but it may not last forever. It may last for a month, it may last for 2 months, it may last for a day. But give me 1 second. You can go. But it's accepting the fact that it's never going to be perfect every day. I think it's a different point of view on this.
Hey, that is $1 million question. That's why I just wanted to ask you, see if you had a different answer or something like that. The other thing I wanted to ask was, many concept artists work on multiple projects at once. Do you do the same thing?
So I used to work on many, many projects at once. Uh, I see now that through aging, it's not possible as much to do. And it's been really hard to accept actually, because the fact is it's like a blade, you know. The more you sharpen the edge, the sharper the blade. And I realized that when I do work on many projects, uh, I am sharper as an artist, you know, and I am more trained. I am more flexible. I see things better. You can see designs more clearly. You can see, you can have ideas more better. But it's accepting the fact once again that you are aging. Yeah, I am an aging artist, and that things may not be the same than when I was 30 years old, you know. And I think it's been the last few years difficult thing for me to digest, accepting the fact that having a baby, getting married, building a home, you know, takes time, you know, and it's deciding if you want to invest all your time in your work and neglecting your kids or your life, you know, like maybe my parents did, you know, or accepting the fact that I have to balance things a little better, trying to do things a little better than what my parents did and pay a price for it. And I am willing to pay the price of not being as sharp, but having a good balanced life overall. Um, but the thing is that, so to answer your question, I think working on many projects at once, especially when you're young or when you have that energy in you, is a very good idea, especially if you have the time. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, I tried working on multiple projects at once before. I didn't like it at all, because I like to just kind of just focus in on one story and think about it everywhere I go,
And
dinner,
I think you
everything.
feel like that because you're probably a very balanced person. Seriously, I think that's probably the reason why. So I think it's good. I think it's very good.
Okay, well, um, yeah, it's interesting that you're talking about age as an artist. A lot of people probably don't really realize because it's like, well, you're 60 years old, you can still hold up a pencil, no problem, right? And there's no real physical things about us that would really stop us from painting and drawing. But it's a
That's
mental
true.
thing, right?
That that's true. But you just actually made me think of something. Is that I noticed something over the last few years. Is that talking about a trick to be creative? Okay, I realized that my output of artwork is perfectly correlated with my physical shape. Like if I am not in very good shape, I don't create as well as much. If like for the last 5 months, I've had like really bad back pain, and I've seen my output in artwork just dropping because of that. So I would say that that's one trick actually is to be doing regular exercise. Actually, is a huge help in creating. That's what I would say.
The yoga must help you a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah. So that's one advice I can give.
I really feel for your pain because I go through back pain as well, especially when I don't get enough sleep. I
Hmm.
don't know if it increases for
Yep,
you.
I have the same. Well, I mean, back pain started when we had our child, so it's directly related to lack of sleep to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And is that your biggest challenge today as an artist? You know,
As of
balancing?
today, yes,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
Well, you know, good for you because you're really showing you're you're really being a great role model for people out there. I was just reading an article this morning about the CEO for a big company and his daughter. You know, he quit recently, and it's because his daughter gave him a list of everything that he missed in her
Hmm.
life. You know,
That's that's exactly it. That's exactly what I don't want to happen to me. That's exactly it. Hmm.
now, if you were at your ideal version of success, you know, as an artist, what, or as just as a person, what would that be? You know, what do you think you would do artistically or change about your life right now?
It's very strange because I am at a point in my life where I mean I've reached the dream that I always had as as a student, as a designer student. Is that I work with the people that I've always dreamed to work with. I work on the projects that I never dreamt I would work on, you know. So I'm a strange phase right now where I don't know what I want. As of today, I don't really know what I want. I mean, I'm happy doing what I'm doing, but I feel that I am in a personal quest of defining what do I want to become next.
Hmm.
That'd be my answer.
That's cool too. That's cool too.
So it'd be hard to answer. I'm actually, if I could, okay, let me say, if I could have everything I want just right now,
Hmm.
I would be having a lot of money, not for the money, but to be able to design everything that surrounds me. I want to design my own car. I want to design my own house. I want to design my own boat. I want to design. That would be my dream. Is to be designing physically things that surround me. That'd be my dream come true. Here we go.
I could just imagine thousands of years from now, archaeologists dig up your stuff and it's like, where did this stuff come from? How come it's so different from everything else? That
I
would be
wish.
really cool. Really
I
cool.
wish.
Now, you know, these interviews go by extremely quick, and we're pretty much at the end of our
Great.
interview. But I wanted to ask one last question. If you could have the opportunity to thank someone from your past, you know, who would he or she be, and what did they do or teach you that was special?
Wow. I have many people to thank. I have uh, many artists to thank. Uh,
It could be just the first kind of person that pops into your mind. It doesn't have to be the most important or anything like that.
God. Uh, I thank Ridley Scott. There we go. I thank Ridley Scott for, first of all, I mean, inspiring me as a kid, you know, and um, and inspiring me as an adult, you know. That's what I would say.
What was that like? You know, working with a person that you revered for so long, loved his work, and now you're actually working with him.
It was very surreal. That's what I would say. It was a mixture of surreal and at the same time just another day at work. It was very weird. It was uh, yeah, that's what I would say, very surreal. Like almost as if this whole life was a weird dream, where when I was a kid watching his movies, I never thought ever that would work for him ever. So very surreal. That's what I would say.
I think you hit it right on the head. That's pretty much been my experience working on cool projects. It's been like a lot of people's experiences. It's almost as if we we look at ourselves a little lower and
Hmm.
everybody else a little higher. So once
Hmm.
you're working with them, you're like, wow.
Exactly. Mm.
Well, David, thank you so much again
Thank
for
you.
spending the time with me. I really, really appreciate it. I know everybody out there that's watching this interview does as well.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Join me on schoolism.com for art classes where you'll learn from known professional artists. Watch the lessons, do the assignments, hand in your assignment to the site, and in a few days you would receive a new video where you have your assignment on screen. Your teacher would then paint and draw on top of your assignment, designing their teaching towards your specific skill level. You can watch the videos on your own time. You can do the assignments on your own time. You have a due date. That's it. You have access to the videos 24/7, and the best thing of all is that you can ask the teacher any questions that you want. Also, you get to watch everybody else's video critiques as well, because they'll be asking all sorts of different questions that totally pertain to you. It's just that you never thought of asking them. If you'd like to find out more, you can visit us at schoolism.com and sign up for a class today.